Starcom Radio Network. Our next guest is Paul Loudon. Paul is a noted public speaker, radio show host, welcome aboard, and author of Behind the Locked Door, Understanding My Life as an Autistic. As an adult on the autism spectrum, Paul is able to provide a unique perspective into the autistic mind. Paul, welcome to the Ed Tyll Show on Starcom Radio Network.
Thank you for having me.
Sure. What is autism in your, what's the clinical on the book's definition? And then tell me if you vary with that at all.
Well, the DSM-5 describes autism with a few traits, social communication delays, sort of obsessive interest or behavior, and a few other things. And it describes how to look at those and determine the severity of them. Autism itself is really hard to describe because we call it a spectrum disorder, that it has such a wide range of severity. And at the lowest end, it can look like a person who's unable to even speak necessarily or do basic tasks. And at the high end, you get people who are able to hide it from most of the people around them. But if they have a diagnosis, it's because it still impacted their ability to have a successful life, and so they're still struggling with it. And it also comes with a lot of potential other conditions as well, what are called comorbid conditions, which a lot of people think of as autism, but aren't really part of the diagnosis. They're just things that are more likely if you're on the autism spectrum, things like some of the gut issues we have, potential for higher chance of seizures and epilepsy, things like that. As for myself, I have what a lot of people would call high-functioning autism. Usually the line for that is sort of around whether or not we can show a certain degree of independence. I live on my own, things like that. But I still struggle with a lot of the anxiety and difficulty when I leave my home and I'm around people. And I still have a lot of difficulty. I wasn't able to get through college because of it, things like that. So it has a lot of variety, and it can be hard for people to sort of see, you know, what autism looks like when it looks so many different ways to people from the outside.
Would you say now that you're succeeding with it? I mean, can progress be made, or do you really fend it off, carry it with you? Can you feel that it's different? It maybe has less of a hold on you? How would you describe, you know, progress, if you will, in your experience with autism?
Well, I sort of interpret autism as having different parts. You know, I titled my book, My Life as an Autistic. Autism, as a part of it, it filters the way you experience the world. You know, I tell people, imagine if you live every day wearing green sunglasses. You'll still be able to do most of what a lot of people do, but, you know, you may argue with people over colors and things like that. You experience things differently. Mm-hmm. And so that's one part of it, is just the different experience. And that made me an autistic, as I describe it, as someone who grew up through the filter of autism. But there's also the disability part, the part that are things that really impact your ability to have a regular life. In my case, there are motivation issues, there have been communication issues, hygiene issues, things like that. And those are the ones that I've worked hard on addressing with therapists, with medication for my depression, with things like that. And so I do think that I am in a better place. And I've noticed that, you know, as I work on those other issues, I get my average anxiety level, and things like sensory issues that are harder to work on, things like the fact that I hear sounds and have a hard time filtering so that I concentrate on just, you know, the sounds that I should be paying attention to, the conversation I'm having, that those have become easier as I've addressed the general anxiety and difficulty of the other things that are drawing away parts of my mind. So autism is a complex and difficult thing to address, but it's one of those things that as you address all of the parts of it, you can make progress and improvements in your life, though sometimes when you're living inside of it, you know, it is small steps. It can be very hard for you as someone with autism to recognize it without the people around you helping you to really catch where improvements have brought you.
Sure. Now, this study, you know, you got to be careful, too, with studies in the media. So we'll just take it at face value. Right? I mean, every day it's a new study, and then people get jerked around sometimes like yo-yos. But this one does suggest a very provocative link. Children of smart fathers having a higher risk of autism. First of all, does it make sense to you? Does that sound logical in a way?
Well, okay, so this study is really interesting because it's based on records for almost 310,000 people, which that's a lot. I mean, studies of a couple of hundred are considered pretty significant in a lot of cases. Mm-hmm. So hundreds of thousands. But the interesting thing about it is it's based on IQ tests, which we're learning more and more. IQ tests are designed around not any hard there's no hard what is intelligent out there, but rather that they're based around sort of what the opinion of intelligence looks like. And then we do know that IQ tests to a degree, if you have a high IQ, you're more likely to be successful in life. But what's really interesting is that autistic individuals have certain types of thought patterns. We tend to be very black and white thinkers. We tend to be very focused on why and the logical order of things and cause and effect. We think of things in absolute clear steps that are hard to find. And that, is very close to logical thinking. We tend to be more attracted to math, to science, to computers. So my feeling is, and part of this, in this IQ test, they found that quote, intelligent fathers are more likely to have autistic children, but it's a statistically relevant amount more likely, but it's still a small amount more likely. So it's not like if you're intelligent, you're probably going to have an autistic child. It's like if you're intelligent, there's a small percent chance you're slightly more at risk. Right. And so I think that ties into how we define IQ tests, that part of the traits we look for in our IQ tests are mildly autistic traits of having that interest in math and science, of being more to logical thinking. And so these parents, we know autism has a genetic trait. These parents may be very mildly autistic in the first place, not high enough to be diagnosed, not even close possibly, but they may have some of that in them already. And so I'm thinking that, over the years, as we learn more about this, that's what it's going to look like, is that we see certain aspects of autism as actually valuable. It's just when it gets turned up too high, it goes from valuable to damaging.
Right. Wow. That really is a provocative conclusion from that. Give me some latitude on this next question, as having followed this issue for decades, literally. And the breakthroughs, come kind of sporadically. So it's kind of just a catch-up big picture question. Some of the folks that I first spoke to in the mid to late 80s on this issue brought up to me something that made sense to me back then, but now we're so further down the line, I want to kind of run it by you. And this would tie right into the having a smart dad and whatever. Is there any possibility that autism is directly related to neglecting sensitive children? And because it's a burst on the scene is with working mom, divorce era Americans. It's exploding because really sensitive people really need their parents. And in this lard-ass society of I got to have all the money and the car, it's been daycare, babysitters. I didn't know they were on heroin. I didn't know they were gay. I didn't know they were transgender. Parents in this argument don't know a damn thing. So they'd never value their brilliant and sensitive kids who needed them desperately because they weren't capable of nuance or attention at that level. And there's going to be a watershed of this because they just didn't even think that it might be them. Horrible to even think, right? But I ask it because, there's a crowd that believes this. And I totally bleed for America's children for the last 40 years. Abortion and divorce have crushed children's lives. They're on every suicidal Facebook thing they can find because they know their parents don't give a damn at the level that matters to them. And this is what makes me suggest autism. The highly brilliant kids with highly attenuated emotions, These parents were nothing like what they needed to be for these kids. Crazy theory?
It's one of those things where there's been a lot of research into the parental neglect question, and a lot of evidence has shown that really autism is more of a genetic thing, more of a environmental thing in the sense that we've seen that pollution, poor nutrition, things like that increase the likelihood. But it's also one of those things where, when you do have someone who's in that high functioning range where they may not show signs early on, we've recently learned that girls who have autism are much more likely for it to show signs during adolescence rather than at younger ages. And we know the ideal age to catch it at is 2, or to spot it at is 2, rather, not to catch it like it's a disease. But that we're learning a lot of things about how important early intervention is. And so, there is that question of, parental responsibility. Parents don't cause autism. A lot of parents get lost in blaming themselves when they receive the diagnosis, and it can be a really depressive thing. But parents do play an absolute key role in helping the outcome be the best it possibly can, spotting it early, and then intervening in what ways they can, be it BCBA and other therapies, be it finding the right schools or whatever. So there is a strong tie in outcomes with early intervention, and there is an active component there. But parents aren't to blame, but they have a tremendous opportunity to intervene and help.
Where is the best place to get this book? And I want people to get it, and I want you to come back and visit with us from time to time, because what we need is someone who will clarify and sift through the noise out there on a very, very important subject. What's the best way to get your book?
The best way to find me in my book is to go to loudenonautism.com. That's Louden. And from there, you can order it from Amazon, find videos of me talking on various topics like this and things like that, and learn more.
Paul, you're terrific because you're such a good communicator, and it really does become more understandable from you. I really thank you for that. So many issues suffer from clarity. And I think you've really helped on this issue today with me and our listeners across the country. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me.
You bet. Paul Louden, wow. There's a book you need to get if you want to understand what's really going on with autism. Very simple. I want you to go and get the book on Amazon from our guest today, Paul Louden. His name is spelled Louden. You can actually go to the website, loudenonautism.com. Our guest, Paul Louden, a noted public speaker, radio show host himself, and the author of Behind the Locked Door, Understanding My Life as an Autistic. Amazon.com, Behind Locked Door, Understanding Autistic ebook. You get that on Amazon, but go to Paul's website. Start there. Get to know him, his situation a little bit better, and get a hold of the book, Behind the Locked Door, Understanding My Life as an Autistic by Paul Louden. The Ed Tyll Show, Starcom Radio Network, AM/FM stations all across America. We're going to get you caught up on news, weather, traffic. The closing bell is straight ahead on Wall Street.